The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Friend, who set me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And Jesus said to the crowd, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then Jesus told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' And so it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." The Gospel of the Lord.
The old gospel preacher ended his homily with the question, "Brothers, sisters, have you ever seen a U-Haul on the back of a hearse?" And the answer is, of course not, but you may want to keep that in mind as we look at today's gospel reading. Jesus is teaching his disciples. There's an interruption, so he pivots. Instead of teaching them not to worry about persecution, he begins teaching them not to live for material wealth. It's the parable of the rich fool. It's a parable that's unique to Luke's gospel. You're not going to find it anywhere else. The rich fool has an obsession with material goods. It's an obsession that leads to self-absorption. His sole concern, if you will mind the pun, is accumulating his wealth and placing himself at the center of it. He uses the pronouns me, my, and I 10 times in 3 verses. Talk about a narcissist. Contrast the rich fool with another biblical story, another biblical character, the Old Testament patriarch Joseph, whose story, like the parable of the rich fool, also involves a large harvest. But in Joseph's case, humility, wisdom, they are employed instead of greed or narcissism. And the outcome is very different. An entire nation is fed during a time of famine. So what's the difference between these two figures? The rich fool, he lives as though he's in control of life. And the result? His own demise. Joseph, on the other hand, lives knowing that God is in control. And the result is the preservation of countless lives, including his own. It would seem that the rich fool did not follow the words of an even richer man, Solomon, who wisely noted, "There's nothing better for a man to eat and drink and being content with what he's been given. Or even the humbler words of St. Paul, who said, if we have sandals on our feet, food on our plate, it's enough. In truth, the rich fool had more in common with business magnates like Howard Hughes or the Rockefellers than any biblical figures. Recall John D. Rockefeller. He made this rapacious reply to the question, how much wealth is enough wealth, Mr. Rockefeller? And he said, a little more than I have right now. And recall Howard Hughes, his covetous reply to the comment, money is not everything, Mr. Hughes. And he said, that's because you've never been poor. To be sure, economic poverty is not a virtue, nor is financial wealth a sin. But for our safety, both need to be under the lordship of Christ. Otherwise, you just might see the fruitless endeavor of a U-Haul behind ours. See, the real problem with people like the Rockefellers, Howard Hughes, the rich fool, they're convinced life is theirs to control. They may believe in God in principle, but they live life like atheists. To contrast that, consider the pointed question that Jesus put to his disciples. What does it profit a man to gain the entire world but forfeit his soul? Or again, what can a man give in exchange for his soul? The answer, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Your soul is your greatest treasure. It's not to be exchanged for the trifles of this life, but guarded carefully for the next. Jesus' parable of the rich fool conveys two vital things for us. Number one, we're not in control. God is. Our greatest plans can come to naught at any moment because the Lord of life can demand them of us, and no amount of material wealth is going to pay that bill. These lives that we consider to be ours, well, actually, they're only on loan. The tragedy of the rich fool is, in trying to save his life, he lost it because avarice, not Jesus, was his master. The proverb that we could draw from this parable is, don't become so taken up with material life that you forget to leave room for Christ in your life. Number two, all that we possess comes from God. No one accumulates riches, great or small, without God giving them. And out of those riches, we are called to live and then give in proportion to what we've been given. If we possess great wealth, then we give in abundance. If we possess little wealth, we can still give something with the confidence in knowing that God will return that blessing. Faithful of Holy Redeemer, life conspires to tell us that we're in control. Science, technology, experts, politicians, they tell us so. But our lived experience is different. Our lived experience is rising food prices, rising gasoline prices, and housing shortages. Our lived experience is unexpected job loss and unexpected illness. The talking heads are telling us one thing, our lived experience is telling us another. So, if we are not in control, why then do we live as we are? It's an endeavor as fruitless as a U-Haul behind a hearse. There's only one who is in control, and that's why we look to him. Amen.